Thank you very much. Eikوموس? Yeah, I give the floor now to eikوموس, please. eikوموس.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Al-Assa Oasis consists of palm groves and water channels, as well as buildings, urban fabric, and archaeological sites that together are seen to represent the evolution of an ancient cultural tradition in the Gulf region of the Arabian Peninsula from the Neolithic period up to the present day. In terms of categories of cultural property, this is a serial nomination of 12 sites. It is also nominated as a cultural landscape. The map shows the location of the property in the east of the Arabian Peninsula. The oasis of Al-Assa lies between the desert and the coast, on a vast plain where groups began to settle in the Neolithic era, attracted by the abundance of water and a favorable natural environment. As the climate became drier, oasis life developed sometime during the 3rd millennium before the Christian era. The defining characteristics of Al-Assa Oasis, the cultivation of dates and its complex water irrigation and management systems, appear to have been introduced in the Dilmun period, between the 3rd to the 2nd millennium before the Christian era, based on water management techniques from Mesopotamia. As the area grew enough crops to trade, prosperous towns arose linked to maritime routes around the Gulf and overland trade routes through the Arabian desert. The oasis was extended in the Islamic period, and by the 16th century there were more than 50 villages and 2 towns. Until the 1960s, the enlarged Dilmun structures still persisted. The distinctive water distribution system that circulated water from around a number of springs and wells to the palm groves through herringbone-patterned channels and then drained into Al-Asfar Lake, an ensemble of villages and agricultural towns that managed the trade, and the oasis have become the largest in the world. Today, the oasis is described in the nomination dossier as having been transformed from changes undertaken to the irrigation system and from urban growth based on the oil industry. In 1967, an irrigation project was launched to address the waning efficiency of water distribution, and a new network of canals was laid. Although the new network has affected the traditional aspect of the property, the modern canals mostly follow the path of historic ones. Until the 1960s, the sharing of water was undertaken in a communal way based on agreement between farmers. Now the Al Hassan Irrigation and Drainage Authority is in charge of this aspect. As a result of these changes, the farming system has moved from community-led to a market-led economy. Villages have almost disappeared, with only parts of one, now unoccupied, having survived. The second transformation was the rapid expansion of the urban areas brought about by the development of the oil industry and the rebuilding of traditional structures in the existing towns. 12 component sites have been nominated, which together are seen to cover all the morphological elements of the oasis cultural landscape. These consist of 3 large palm groves with their irrigation channels, the Al-Asfar Lake that collects surplus water from the canals, 2 archaeological sites at Ain Kinas and Jawatha with evidence of Neolithic pottery and later Islamic irrigation systems, part of Al-Oyan village, which includes fragments of the unique typology of houses that persisted until the 1970s. Also included are the Jawatha Mosque, said to have been built over the traditional site of the second mosque in Islam and recently reconstructed, and the Al-Bataliya Mosque, also recently restored. The remaining components are 2 forts, a complex of Ottoman period buildings, and the 19th century souk, Al-Khazariya. The property is nominated as an evolving cultural landscape, and one that has changed dramatically since the 1960s. But the evolution has not primarily come about with the agricultural community being central players. Although the water channels still for the most part reflect their early alignment, the oasis cannot be said to reflect mainly traditional practices. Whereas in most cultural landscapes, some modern interventions have been introduced to support the persistence of practices, at Al-Assa, the interventions have all but replaced such practices. Al-Ahsa is no longer an overall eco-cultural system in which the technical and social management of water allows palm cultivation to support a social unit in a sustainable way. Eikoumoos considers that the oasis system, which spread from Saudi Arabia across the Maghreb, is a settlement typology that is underrepresented on the World Heritage List. But at Al-Ahsa, the components do not combine to reflect the traditional structures of an oasis landscape in which the attributes that convey its value have persisted over time. Eikoumoos does not consider that the criteria 3, 4, and 5 can be justified. The oasis no longer primarily reflects cultural traditions, as interventions have interrupted the long-standing relationship between people and the natural landscape, and it can no longer be seen as an exceptional testimony to a cultural tradition or as an outstanding example of traditional human settlement. The property also does not reflect in an outstanding way the periods of history that have shaped its development. In terms of integrity, development has engulfed parts of the oasis and changed its setting dramatically. Traditional villages have been replaced by modern urbanization to a degree that impacts on integrity. Authenticity is, in our view, not demonstrated overall for the series in terms of its ability to reflect the long-standing traditions of the oasis and its social structures. Eikoumoos notes that Al-Ahsa has been nominated as an evolving landscape rather than an evolved one, which, as defined in the operational guidelines, clearly reflects the way it has evolved over time and needs to be sustained in the future. The idea of an evolving landscape appears to mean that the limits of permissible change are not clearly defined, nor precisely what cannot change, and this implies that its value could also evolve over time. In conclusion, Eikoumoos also has concerns in terms of the boundaries, protection, conservation and management, where further work we consider is needed. In conclusion, Eikoumoos recommends that the Al-Ahsa oasis, as nominated as an evolving cultural landscape, should not be inscribed on the World Heritage List. Thank you, Madam Chair.